Namaskar and welcome to Sansad Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our show Perspective, where we bring you detailed analysis of key national and international issues. Today we're going to talk about the ongoing economic and political crisis in Sri Lanka. For more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of experts. Let me first introduce them to you. Beginning with, we have with us former Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, who is joining us. Welcome, Ambassador Dayal, to Sansad Television. Professor Swaran Singh from JNU is also joining us. Welcome to you as well, Professor Swaran Singh. And we also have with us Dilrukshi Handuneti. She is a senior journalist joining us from Colombo. Welcome to you also, Ms. Handuneti, on Sansad Television. Professor Swaran Singh, how do you assess the situation in the island nation there, given the recent developments as well, and as both Ms. Handuneti and Mr. Dayal are referring to, looks like the people are seeking a complete change.
Thank you, Vishal, for having me, first of all. Let me say I come from international relations discipline. So no doubt everybody is saying this is the worst economic or financial crisis that Sri Lanka has seen since its independence in 1948. But this has to be located in larger picture. And you would notice that only a few months back, the world was discussing with 70% inflation rate in Turkey that Turkey is the country which will be the first to cave in. Only in March, World Bank President David Malpass, addressing their annual spring meeting, had identified, saying that most of the low-income countries were suffering the pandemic consequences, which he listed among them as rising costs of debts, increasing costs of food, fuel, fertilizer. And then he said, followed Ukraine, which has worsened the crisis. Likewise, for example, IMF in last few months only had signed fresh debt of about 45 billion with similar low-income countries like South Africa, Ethiopia, Argentina, Ghana, Kenya, Peru. And you would notice reports of power cuts one after another, not only in neighboring country called Pakistan, but Egypt, Tunisia, Sri Lanka, and so many of them others. So it's a larger global problem which international financial institutions are telling us all of us have to really face. And Sri Lanka is only a symptom of the larger crisis. No doubt, Rajapaksa family has been more or less dominating politics in Sri Lanka. Almost you can stretch it to half a century, and they are now at a very difficult, tight bend where you see this united family itself is falling apart, and the five members of the family which were virtually ruling the country, Gotabaya as president, Mahinda as prime minister, Basil as finance minister, Chamal as agricultural minister, and son Namal. And they have now to rush and then be rescued to Trincomalee. So internally as well, there is a kind of an unusual situation, which partly I'm sure Rajapaksa family is responsible for increasing the divide between Tamils and minorities, the Muslims and Tamils versus Sinhalas, and raising this jingoism over a period of time. But to me, what makes it more complex is that it is not only limited to internal factors of Sri Lanka, which can be injected, like IMF team is already in Colombo discussing the bailout and asking for some political reforms as a consequence. So because it is not limited only to internal turmoil in Sri Lanka, which is of course enormous. It's a civil war situation. You can see 50 houses of members of parliament being gutted. Prime Minister's house being gutted. That's a serious internal problem. But to me, as a scholar of international relations, what makes it really tough is that this is located in a larger global problem of low-income countries. Sri Lanka used to be a model in South Asia at some stage, and now it is the worst country to think of in South Asia. India is trying to get involved as much as possible. I'm sure we will discuss in later part of the program.
Indeed.
But I think we need to underline the larger global problem among these least income, low income countries, which is where this rising debt prices, food, fertilizer, fuel, everything is going up. And with Ukraine diverting attention and resources to somewhere else, is going to make this, I think, a problem which will be difficult to solve in Sri Lanka. Plus, it could have dynamo impact in other countries.
Professor Swaran Singh, concluding comments from you on the ways, through which this complex situation can be resolved in Sri Lanka. It started with the economic crisis, but now it has become more complex with the political turmoil as well. political instability is leading to, making it more difficult for the economic crisis to be resolved?
Thank you. I think it's very clear. I agree with both other panelists. It's not just economic or financial crisis; it's political crisis now. But let me say something not what is desirable, but what is feasible. You remember Gotabaya Rajapaksa was elected as president with 52% of popular votes. So he's been popular in terms of his election. He stays as president till 2024. Only way to remove him will be 2/3 of majority in parliament, and of course Supreme Court also sort of siding with that decision. That to me seems impossible. So he's going to stay in command, and it's a quasi-presidential form of government in Sri Lanka. So he will have to put some kind of a caretaker government in place and then find out solution in consultation, coordination with international financial agencies. India would be a major neighboring country. We already know $3.5 billion that India is putting into Sri Lanka in various ways. But it is important to understand, let me make a very important separate last point, is corruption is not a problem only in Sri Lanka. I understand we have to blame it to Rajapaksa family, the way they have siphoned away money, as reports are saying. But I think deeper problem was their inability to handle economic crisis that flow out of a pandemic. And particularly tourism really, drying up completely. And foreign exchange today, I'm told is about 50 million in Sri Lanka.
Okay.
So they are not only going to kind of, fail in debt repayments. Potentially, there could be a bankrupt economy very soon. So its inability to overcome the crisis that pandemic threw up, that I think is a deeper issue for me. Of course, corruption is a major issue, but corruption is not only in Sri Lanka. Corruption is in several other countries which are also facing similar crises.
Okay.
But they are so far able to manage the crisis better. The reckless economic policies, I think, that Rajapaksa has followed with overconfidence, along with siphoning away of money, is what is making people so angry, because people are almost not getting basic essential items. And that is where India is trying to help in providing basic essential items like medicines, food, and other things. And because of the anger of people on the ground, they have found Rajapaksas as a genuine target of their anger. And that is where you see only the ruling party leaders are being attacked and killed, and not the opposition. So I think practicality says that Gotabaya will continue to be president, according to me, because he's elected president, and in the constitution, he has enormous advantage of staying as president and commander of armed forces. And in that sense, some kind of caretaker government, which opposition as yet is very reluctant. The parliament chair is saying, let us convene the parliament as soon as possible and find out if we can create a caretaker government. And I think that could be an immediate kind of first step forward. But ultimately, it has to be done in tandem with neighboring countries like India, international financial institutions, and because otherwise it's not it's a long haul solution that Sri Lanka will have to look at, and they have to muddle through this political instability. And maybe in next elections, one could think of kind of new political formations emerging from this experience. But I think till 2024, I don't see any scene of Gotabaya really being forcibly removed as president, because that would be terrible for Sri Lanka. It is already almost in civil war. And if it really goes fully into civil war, it will have enormous consequences for neighboring countries as well.
Okay.